Well, US President Donald Trump has suggested that talks with Iran could resume within days, and the comments come after a weekend of failed negotiations in Islamabad.
While speaking to the New York Post, Trump suggested that second round of talks could happen over the next 2 days. He also said that US is inclined to keep Pakistan as the venue for the next round of talks.
Meanwhile, the US military has tightened its blockade around Iranian ports. The United States Central Command confirmed that at least 6 merchant vessels were asked to turn around and return to Iranian ports.
But ship tracking data suggests that at least 4 Iran-linked shipping vessels had crossed the strait despite the blockade.
Well, a potential second round of negotiations with Iran is expected to be led by US Vice President J.D. Vance again. Vance says he believed Iranian negotiators wanted to make a deal.
We had never had a meeting like that where you have, the person who's effectively running the country in Iran sitting across from the Vice President of the United States. That had never happened. And what look, honestly, after 49 years, there's a lot of course, mistrust between Iran and the United States of America. You're not going to solve that problem overnight. But yeah, I think the people we're sitting across from wanted to make a deal. And
Vance also praised Trump's grand ambitions, saying that President Donald Trump is pursuing a sweeping agreement with Iran rather than a narrower deal. Listen to this.
He doesn't want a small deal. And that's one of the reasons why, one, I'd say in Pakistan, we made a ton of progress. But the reason why the deal is not yet done is because the president, he really wants a deal where Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, Iran is not state-sponsoring terrorism, but also the people of Iran can thrive and prosper and join the world economy.
Well, Trump has insisted any deal must permanently bar Iran from becoming nuclear armed. Media reports said the US sought a 20-year suspension of Iran's uranium enrichment program during the weekend talks, and Iran in turn proposed suspending its nuclear activity for 5 years, an offer that US officials rejected.
Meanwhile, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian said that the world should accept Iran within the framework of international law.
Now, whoever we speak to, we say accept us within the framework of international law. We do not act against international law. You should accept those same international laws. They want to eliminate anything that leads to growth and awareness.
Following the Islamabad talks, Iran's leading negotiator and country's foreign minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi said that both sides were inches away from the deal. But US delegation kept changing the goalposts. Tehran has maintained that it will not seek nuclear weapon, but the decision cannot be forced on them.
The American demands include Iran opening the Strait of Hormuz and abandoning any nuclear weapon ambition. Israel, on the other hand, wants Iran to end its support for Hezbollah, Hamas and Houthis. Meanwhile, the Iranian side, it wants US to lift sanctions and provide assurance that it will not be subjected to any more attacks.
Well, the Iranian side has not yet responded to Trump's remarks over a second round of talks, but United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said it was highly probable that talks would restart.
According to reports, foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Egypt and Turkey, they are likely to meet for talks on regional matters on Friday.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping is also pushing a 4-point peace plan, and these include peaceful coexistence for regional countries, respect for each other's national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Now, upholding the international system with the United Nations at its core and finally linking progress to security to boost economic growth.
According to the report, Xi presented the proposal during a meeting with Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince, and it was done in Beijing.
And for more on this, we're now being joined live by Giorgio Gafiro from Washington, D.C. He is a professor at Georgetown University and CEO of Gulf State Analytics. Professor Gafiro, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Always a pleasure to have you. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Let's start with Washington's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think it could genuinely and realistically weaken Iran enough to actually come back to the negotiating table more ready and more flexible this time around? Or do you think perhaps Washington is overestimating the leverage it has over Iran at this moment?
Yeah, thanks so much. Always great to be on your program. A really important question you're asking here. I think obviously that's the thinking on the part of the Trump administration, is that if the United States continues to impose this blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, it will squeeze Iran to the point whereby the country's leadership determines that it's in Tehran's interest to simply come back to the negotiating table and make more concessions and make them rather quickly. That, from the White House's perspective, would be the ideal outcome of this blockade. However, I think the people who are in agreement with that argument and people who advocate for continuing this blockade, which really got started 36 hours ago, tend to overlook some of the serious risks that are associated with this new U.S. blockade. I think, in short, it's going to make it less likely that diplomacy works. Let's keep in mind that under international law, this blockade is an act of war. This does not bode well for keeping the ceasefire in place. And I think there are many other questions maybe we can get to later about real risks when it comes to U.S.-China relations and all the scenarios that could unfold there. But in short, I think this risks just bringing the U.S. and Iran back to war very quickly and undermining any hopes that we may have for diplomacy to succeed through Pakistani mediation.